The twin suns of Arcus Prime blazed high in the violet sky, casting elongated shadows across the jagged terrain of the prison colony. A massive gate groaned open, its rusted hinges screaming in protest. Beyond it, the expanse of the galaxy seemed to beckon, but Martin Cross hesitated, standing just short of freedom. The 5 years he'd spent behind those reinforced walls had changed him. Gone was the naive boy who thought he could hustle his way to the stars. In his place stood a lean, sharp-eyed man with more scars than dreams. His dark hair, cropped short, glistened with sweat, and the prison-issued jumpsuit hung loose on his wiry frame. In his hand, he clutched a small canvas bag, his only belongings from 5 years of incarceration. A worn-out datapad, a crude shiv he'd fashioned during darker days, and a neatly folded letter from Lucian. Martin glanced back at the looming fortress one last time, its spire-like towers disappearing into the haze of the planet's smog-filled atmosphere. Arcus Prime was a desolate rock, barely inhabitable, its only purpose to house the galaxy's unwanted. For 5 years it had been his world. Now it was just another scar he'd carry. The voice of the warden crackled through an ancient intercom overhead. "Cross, Martin. You're a free man. Try not to make it back here." Martin smirked, his lips curling into a faint grin. He didn't respond and didn't look back again. There was nothing left for him here. The air outside the prison gates was hot and thick, heavy with the acrid stench of industry. A decrepit hover bus waited at the edge of the landing zone, its engine sputtering like it was on its last legs. The driver, an older man with cybernetic implants replacing half his face, waved him over impatiently. "You getting on or what?" the driver barked. Martin climbed aboard, tossing his bag onto the seat beside him. The interior was as run down as the rest of the planet. Peeling seats, flickering lights, and a faint hum of static from the outdated speakers. The other passengers, all grizzled workers and a few former prisoners like himself, avoided eye contact. Everyone on Arcus Prime had their secrets, and no one wanted to share them. As the bus lurched forward, Martin leaned his head against the cracked window and watched the barren landscape blur past. Jagged cliffs, ash-covered plains, and distant industrial towers formed the bleak backdrop of his journey. But Martin wasn't thinking about Arcus Prime. His mind was already elsewhere, on the possibilities that lay ahead. Lucian's letter had been short, cryptic even, but it promised one thing: opportunity. "You've paid your dues, kid. When you get out, find me on Talvaros Station. There's work waiting for you, the kind that makes real money, the kind that sets you free." Lucian was the closest thing Martin had to a mentor, though mentor wasn't the right word for a man like him. Lucian was a fixer, a broker of deals in the underworld of the Galactic Alliance, Kronos. In prison, he'd been a kingpin, respected and feared by inmates and guards alike. But Lucian hadn't just survived the system, he thrived in it, carving out a network of power that extended far beyond the prison walls. Martin knew the risks of following a man like Lucian. The galaxy was vast, and its underbelly even vaster. But what other choice did he have? Go back to the miserable existence he'd escaped from? Work himself to death in some factory on the fringes of the Alliance? Number that life had already killed his parents. He wouldn't let it kill him too. The bus jolted to a stop, jolting Martin from his thoughts. "Last stop," the driver called out. "Transport hub." Martin grabbed his bag and stepped off the bus into a chaotic bazaar of noise and movement. The transport hub was a sprawling complex of landing pads, merchant stalls, and shantytown dwellings, all buzzing with activity. Starships of every shape and size came and went, their engines roaring as they ascended into the endless sky. He took a moment to soak it all in. This was the first time in 5 years he'd been in a place like this, a place teeming with life, both alien and human. It was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. But Martin had no time to waste. He needed to get off this rock, and fast. He pushed through the crowds, heading for the main terminal. The credits Lucian had wired him were barely enough to buy passage on a freighter, but it would do. He approached a haggard-looking ticket broker sitting behind a cracked holoscreen. "Where to?" the broker asked, not bothering to look up. "Talvaros Station," Martin said. The broker raised an eyebrow, his augmented eyes flickering as he scanned Martin. "Talvaros, huh? That's a rough place for a guy like you." Martin chuckled. "You'd be surprised." The broker shrugged and tapped a few buttons on his console. "There's a transport leaving in an hour. Cheap, but you'll be riding with cargo. You want it or not?" "I'll take it." Talvaro Station hung in the void like a tarnished jewel. Its massive, angular hull shimmered faintly against the backdrop of a nebula, a strange fusion of alien and human design. Long, uneven corridors extended from its core, glowing faintly with the lights of thousands of docking bays, markets, and private quarters. For those seeking fortune or hiding from the galaxy's prying eyes, Talvaros was a beacon. The transport freighter docked roughly, jarring Martin awake from a light sleep. The smell of stale air and rust filled his nostrils as the cargo bay doors creaked open, and a flood of noise spilled in. The hum of ship engines, the chatter of voices in dozens of languages, and the sharp bark of traders hawking their wares. Martin slung his bag over his shoulder and stepped out, immediately swallowed by the chaos of the station. The docking ring bustled with activity as beings of all shapes and sizes negotiated, argued, or simply passed by, their faces obscured by helmets, masks, or tattoos. The alien scent of ozone and exotic spices lingered in the air, blending with the metallic tang of the station's recycled atmosphere. He kept his head down and moved with purpose. Lucian's instructions had been clear. Find Dock 57, Bay C. The message had been burned into his mind ever since he'd read it on the transport. Martin passed through a bustling corridor where holograms advertised everything from cybernetic enhancements to unlicensed weaponry. A flickering ad for a fighting arena caught his attention, the promise of big winnings flashing in bold, golden letters. Not today, he thought. He needed to stay focused. The deeper he went into the station, the dimmer the lights became. The polished steel and neon of the upper levels gave way to dimly lit, grimy corridors, their walls scarred with graffiti and scorch marks. The smell of sweat and desperation grew stronger. At last he reached Dock 57. The bay was quiet, the bustle of the station seeming to fade into the background. A few cargo containers were stacked haphazardly along the walls, and a single maintenance drone hovered nearby, its beeping echoing faintly in the stillness. A shadow moved near the far wall. "You're late," a deep, gravelly voice called out. Martin froze, his instincts kicking in. Slowly he turned toward the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light. It was Lucian. The man was exactly as Martin remembered him, tall, broad-shouldered, and imposing, with a cybernetic eye glowing faintly red. His dark coat billowed slightly as he moved, and the hilt of a plasma blade jutted out from his belt. Despite his years in prison, Lucian carried himself with the same effortless confidence that had made him a legend among inmates. Martin relaxed slightly but kept his guard up. "Wasn't exactly a direct route from Arcus Prime," he said with a smirk. Lucian chuckled, his voice like gravel grinding against steel. "Fair enough. Welcome to Talvaros. You're about to find out why they call it the heart of the galaxy's underworld." "I'm guessing you didn't bring me here to sightsee," Martin replied. "No." Lucian's tone turned serious. "I brought you here because you've got potential, and because I need someone I can trust." Martin raised an eyebrow. "Trust? That's a big word coming from you." Lucian shrugged. "You survived Arcus. You didn't fold, didn't snitch, and you've got guts. That's enough for me. He motioned for Martin to follow him, leading him toward a small side door that opened into a private room. Inside, a circular table glowed faintly with a holographic display of the galaxy. Several datapads and weapons were scattered across its surface. Lucian gestured for Martin to sit. "Let's talk business." Martin dropped his bag onto the floor and took a seat. "I'm listening." Lucian tapped a button on the table, and the hologram shifted, zooming in on a specific sector of the galaxy. A single planet blinked in red. "This is Vexar 3, Lucian began, "a backwater mining world on the edge of Kronos space. The local government's corrupt, the workers are overtaxed, and the Alliance doesn't give a damn. But it's sitting on a fortune in Valtherium ore, enough to make anyone who controls it very, very rich." Martin leaned forward. "And I'm guessing someone already controls it." "Technically, yes," Lucian said, "but the Syndicate's grip is slipping. The workers are restless, and the Syndicate's leader, a man named Jorek Caney, is getting sloppy. That's where we come in." "We?" Lucian grinned. "I'm putting together a crew. We're going to hit one of Caney's shipments, something big enough to hurt him, but small enough not to draw the Alliance's attention. It's a test run, and if it works, we'll start carving out a slice of Vexar for ourselves." Martin frowned. "And what's my role in this?" "Simple," Lucian said. "You're the inside man. You're going to join Caney's crew, earn their trust, and feed us the intel we need to make our move."
If you enjoyed listening to my story, join me on Amazon and check out my books. The link is in the description. Thank you.